Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Saraswati Namastudhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karuna Amayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. So let us read Bhagavad Gita. We'll start from reading verse 39 and we'll read to verse 41. Okay. So 39 to 41. Esha te vihita sankhye buddhir yoge tvimam shrunu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. Neha vikramana shosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Vyavasayatmika buddhihi ekeha kuru nandana bahushakhāyanantāscha buddhayo vyavasayinam. Okay, so 2 weeks ago when we met, we started discussing verses 39 to 41. And in verse 39 in chapter 2, what he says is, Esha te bhita sankhye. So whatever I have spoken to you, O Arjuna, in verses 11 to 25, that's called Sankhya Yoga. Means it's the knowledge of the self. But he says, Buddhi yoge tvimam shunu. Now I'm going to speak to you about Yoga Buddhi. Yoga Buddhi means Karma Yoga. I'm going to speak to you about Yoga Buddhi. And why? Because Buddhya yuktaha yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. Because once you are engaged in this karma yoga, it will relieve you from the bondage of karma. Last time we spoke about how karma itself is a bondage and it is a continuous circle. So we saw that every action that we do, it gives us a phala, it gives us a fruit, whether it's sukham or dukkam, joy or sorrow. And upon experiencing that fruit, again, we get this thirst to want to act again. We get this impression that, oh, I experienced something so joyful. So let me go ahead and repeat that action again and again. So one scenario we see is that we act, we get joy from it, and then after that, it leaves an impression that this thing will give me joy, and therefore I desire more of that thing, and then I act again and again and again, and I go on this cycle. What about sorrow? Sometimes I act, and then I get the sorrow as a result. So because I didn't get what I wanted, I'm going to act again to try and get what I want. So again, I'm still stuck in the cycle. I didn't get what I wanted, so I'm thinking maybe joy is somewhere else, and maybe joy is somewhere else. And realistically, we go through life like this. And the only way to really come out of this cycle of action, which is unending, we see is through karma yoga. Of course, it's through knowledge, but to get to knowledge, to be able to qualify for knowledge, our minds have to be prepared through karma yoga. And in karma yoga, what happens is instead of being bound by those actions, we're actually liberated by those actions because we're focusing on our growth. And we will see the whole science of karma yoga as it is explained in chapter 2 in the upcoming verses. So Lord Krishna says here, I'm going to tell you this about this yoga buddhi or this karma yoga, because by this, it will help you get out of this cycle of repeated action and repeated samsara. Then he begins to say, before I go into the heart of karma yoga, which is, we will see in verse 2.47, before I go into the heart of that, I want to tell you the difference between karma and karma yoga. Karma being just regular action or action with desire, what we're referring to as kamya karma, and karma yoga, which is dedicated action, selfless, dedicated action to something greater than ourselves. So in verses 40 and 41, this is what he tries to tell Arjuna. The first thing is, na iha abhikrama nashaha asti. So he says in karma yoga, there's no loss of effort. In regular action, what happens is we start something and we feel that we only get the result when this action finishes or when it completes. So we start any project and we feel like, okay, only when we get the results of that project, then the action is complete. Then our efforts are fruitful, we're fulfilled. And people judge the results of their actions by looking at a profit and loss statement, or thinking about how many people they've reached, or did the quality, was the quality of the product, okay, or did it pass the test? And so they look at this in a very, very logical way. And in this world, we tend to wait until the end for the results. So in somebody's business, they'll say, okay, let's see how we did at the end of this quarter. Then we will know if we were successful or not. So you really, and if you don't reach your goal in any business, in any endeavor, you feel like you lost something. You feel like something wasn't worthwhile. Then in karma yoga, there's no loss of effort because, as we said, it's not about the gain, it's about the growth. In karma yoga, we look at the growth of the individual and the community and the family every step of the way, because our scriptures always remind us that life is about evolution. It's about developing ourselves further so that we realize who we truly are. So when we understand this, in the process of action, we see that purification is happening. So we're not waiting till the end of the action to feel like, I got a result. But in and through the action, we feel like some cleansing is going on, some purification is going on, that we maybe are becoming better. This was very beautifully seen in Puja Gurudev, Swami Chinmayanandaji. Whenever he launched a project, he wouldn't only look at, okay, how did it do, how many people it reached, what was the effect, but he would really look at the growth of the people who organized that project. Did they evolve? Did they grow? Did they learn something? And seeing that was real success. So that's why in karma yoga, there's no loss of effort. Even if you don't reach the goal outwardly, inwardly, we're purifying. The second thing he says is Pratyavaya na vidyate. Pratyavaya is if we fail to do something we're supposed to do. This is called Pratyavaya. right? Or in some cases, if we don't complete that particular action, we'll get an adverse effect of it. So in the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, there are lots of ritualistic practices that are prescribed. And if they're not done in a certain way, or if something is omitted, or if they're not completed, then we will get an adverse effect. Something else contrary will happen. But in Karma Yoga, this doesn't happen because it's about the attitude. It's not about the action per se, but it's really about the attitude. So we won't get any adverse effects or side effects. And it says here, Swalpam api asya dharmasya. So even if just a little bit of Karma Yoga we perform, trayate mahato bhayat, it prevents us from this great fear of this cycle of samsara. Even if it's just a little bit, at least it's a step of purification. So in this way, he says karma is very different from karma yoga. It's got a much more beautiful meaning. And he's praising this slowly, so that Arjuna has the desire or want to know more about karma yoga. Then he brings out this very beautiful verse number 41. And he says that in Karma Yoga, there's what we call Vyavasayatmika Buddhihi. And we just touched upon this. Vyavasayatmika means Nishchaya. Nishchaya means very determined. This very determined Buddhihi. One eka, single pointed determination is what's there in Karma Yoga, O Kurunandana, O Arjuna. But avyavasainam, for those who are indeterminate, for those who are in their buddhi or their intellect is broken up into many, many different forms, bahushaka, their thoughts are like different branches of a tree, and anantaha, and endless. Buddhaya, their thoughts are just endless. What does this say? So first of all, there's something called feeling like we're all in one direction or feeling like we're going in multiple directions. We will notice ourselves in our language saying, yes, I'm sure this is exactly what I want to do. Or sometimes we'll notice ourselves saying, a part of me feels like this, but a part of me wants to do that. We have this distinction, right? So the first case scenario is what you call Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, which is very determined, very clear, and all in to whatever they want to do. The second one is what you call Avyavasayatmika Buddhi, the one that's confused, the one that's broken, the one that's many. And why this happens is, as I mentioned, how our Swamiji said that there are two kinds of people. One with the infinite as the goal, and one with infinite goals. So in Karma Yoga, it's very clear that the infinite is the goal. It's very clear that this action that we're doing is dedicated towards something higher. Now, there are, of course, different stages of Karma Yoga where the higher might not yet be God or the world, because the world is God. It just may be my family. Then slowly it will be expanded to my community or my society. Then slowly it will expand to the world. But in this Karma Yoga mindset, what happens is you have one goal and your life surrounds that goal. It points towards that goal. So that goal could be moksha, liberation, hopefully it is, or self-realization. If it's not, that goal could be self-development. And when everything is pointed towards that goal, then life becomes very easy. There's no like, should I do this? Should I do that? There's no like, what am I doing in my life? There's no like, I'm doing this, but I really feel I should be doing something else. There's none of all of that happening. Life is crystal clear that every step of the way, every action I do I'm walking towards this goal because this is what life's about. There's that clarity. But in regular action, sometimes there is no clarity. Sometimes the goal is not clear. So if 1 week we see that somebody that we know has so much money, they gained so much wealth, they gained so much money, and they became very rich, then our goal becomes, let's get rich. Let's get rich. And our goal becomes that. Or sometimes if we see in society that our friends now have such a wonderful social network, well, how come we don't have that? Then our goal becomes, let's develop a social network. Let's reach out to people. Let's see how much we can meet people, how much we can be with them. And then sometimes we will see, oh, our friends now are traveling to so many wonderful places. Then this becomes the goal. Let me also travel to so many places. So what's happening here is this mind that's not clear about the goal of life is branching out, just like a tree. It's branching out. It's like one week, this is my goal. Another week, this is my goal. Another week, this is my goal. And when my goal changes, my means also change. So in that way, you see that mind is branched out. It's just like a tree, and it's endless. It keeps changing based on what I'm seeing outside. So this kind of mindset of action is like this. It is endless. It is branching out. And not only that, as Gurudev puts it very well, there's like this self-cancellation of thoughts, because one is always quite confused. When we have many goals in life or infinite goals, we're quite confused. Should we do this or should we do that? Which one is more important? Which one should I do now? And so our mind constantly fluctuates. And when our mind does this, we waste a lot of time. It's not that we don't have time. It's that even this kind of indecision is a waste of time. How many times have we wasted time figuring out where to eat? Right? It's a weekend. Where do we eat? Should we go for Chinese? Should we go for Mexican? Should we go for this? And that becomes a half an hour conversation in itself. And then you have so less time to eat. So whenever the mind is branched out this way, there's a lot of self-cancellation of thoughts, and there's a lot of wasted time and energy. As opposed to when I know exactly what direction I'm headed, what I want to do, choices become much easier. They become much quicker. There are those kinds of people who will get on YouTube and then they'll click one video and then watch it for 1 minute and then watch another one for 1 minute and then watch another one for 1 minute. By the time you know it, 30 minutes have passed and they've watched nothing. But there's also the ones who just know what they want and they click what they want and 30 minutes and they're in it. This is what you call vyavasayatmika buddhi. This happens in Karma Yoga because one has that goal in mind. Guruji very beautifully puts it, he's like, you can really see the difference in this mindset. When you're focused on something, on a goal, like Monday to Thursday, you're focused on a goal, everything happens quickly. Monday, get up, get to work, make breakfast, go here, go there. It's a routine, right? Friday night kicks in and what happens? Boom, our energy is all expanded out. Where do I go? What do I do? What's going on? We don't accomplish as much because our mind has completely just gone everywhere. So when we're dedicated to our dharma or our goal, that single pointedness happens. And when we have clarity, but when we're dedicated towards pleasure, that multi-pointedness happens. And life is made for one-pointedness. You'll see in our lives, we're always made to pick one. We're always made to pick one. When, the kids grow up, they're meant to pick one school. When they go to college, they're meant to pick one major. Although now sometimes people do double majors, right? When they're in the workforce, they're meant to pick one position. Sometimes now they have two jobs because out of necessity. When people get married, they're meant to pick one partner. When we worship a form of Bhagavan, we're meant to pick one Ishta Devata. So the whole of life is actually gearing us towards this single pointedness, towards this single pointed goal. Because only when we have that, then we can walk speedily towards it. If we don't, we will take a long time. So what Lord Krishna is trying to say in this verse 41 is, Arjuna, be very clear about the goal of life. The goal of life is self-realization. If you don't see it that way, it's self-development. Be very clear that that's the goal. And be very clear that every single action in that karma yoga spirit is dedicated towards that goal. And once you are clear, you will walk faster. And you will spend less time wondering what in the world you are doing with your life. But on the other hand, those who are not clear with the goal, they will spend a lot of time switching from one place to another, switching from one event to another, trying to figure out their lives. So this is the gist of verse number 41. Now, what he's going to do in the next 3 verses, he's going to tell Arjuna what all happens in the karma kanda of the Vedas and how we get stuck in that, how we get stuck in our pursuit for pleasure. So these are verses 42, 43, and 44. So what we'll do is we'll read 42 and 43, and then we will take those two together, okay? Yamimam pushpitam vacham.
Yamimam pushpitam vacham.
Pravadantya vipaschitaha.
Pravadantya vipaschitaha.
Vedavadarataः partha.
Vedavadarata partha.
Nanyadastiti vadinaha.
Nanyadastiti vadinaha.
Kamatmanaswargaparaha.
Kamatmanaswargaparaha.
Janma karma phalapradam.
Janma karma phalapradam.
Kriya vishesha bahulam.
Kriya vishesha bahulam.
Bhogaishwarya gatim prati.
Bhogaishwarya gatim prati.
We'll read together. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha vedavadarataः partha nanyadastiti vadinaha kamatmanaswargaparaha janma karma phalapradam kriya vishesha bahulam Bhogaishwarya gatim prati. So what happens here is our Vedas are the foundation of our religion, our culture, our dharma. They're the mula, they're the root of our dharma. Now, the Vedas are divided into various parts. So sometimes we will see 4 parts: mantras, brahmanas, aranyakas, upanishads. Sometimes we will see 3: karma kanda, upasana kanda, and jnana kanda. What happens is each kanda, each section of the Veda is made to take us to the next section and then to the final section. So the Karma Kanda is made to slowly move us to the Upasana Kanda, where we practice concentration and contemplative exercises, which is slowly meant to move us to Jnana Kanda, the Upanishad portion or the philosophy of Vedanta. Because slowly, each Kanda prepares our mind. And I had mentioned this to some of you about when we were talking about Navaratri, right? In Navaratri, we're addressing the three problems of the mind. One is called Mala, the impurity of the mind, which is addressed in Karma Kanda. Then Vikshepa, the distracted mind, which is addressed in the Upasana Kanda. And Avarana, the ignorant mind, which is addressed in the Jnana Kanda. And this is also why we worship Durga Devi, Lakshmi Devi, Saraswati Devi, because each of them are removing one impurity from us. So what happens is there's certain people that only look at the Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda means just the ritualistic portion of the Veda. And they take this to be the entire Veda. They take this to be the essence of the Veda. And focusing on this, they live their lives. And so Lord Krishna is describing that mindset in these verses. And what does he say? So who are these people? So first of all, these people, if you look at the first line in verse 42, avipashchitaha. Avipashchitaha means they're not intelligent. Vedavadarataha. Vedavadarataha means they take pleasure in eulogizing the words of the Veda. And we'll see what these mean. And na anyad asti iti vadinaha means they don't see anything other than this. And what do? Pravadanti. Pravadanti means they speak. What do they speak? Pushpitam vacham, flowery words. So yam imam means these flowery words are what they speak. And who are they? Again, we see in 43, kamatmanaha means they're full of desires. Swarga paraha, they have heaven as their highest goal. And the speech that they're speaking, janma karma phala pradam. What does it do? That flowery speech, all it does, it gives another birth and another birth. Kriya vishesha bahula. They speak about these elaborate, unique rituals. And bhogaishwarya gatim prati. They have just bhoga, enjoyment, and power as their goal. So I'll read you the translation and then we will go into it a little bit deeper. It says, flowery speech is uttered by the unwise, taking pleasure in eulogizing the words of the Vedas. O Partha, saying there's nothing else. And full of desires, having heaven as their goal, they utter flowery words which promise new birth as the reward of their actions and prescribe various specific actions for the attainment of pleasure and lordship. So first, we'll take the description of the people who are this particular mindset, which is really us, which is really us, or could have been us at some point in time. Avipashchitaha in unintelligent means is they don't look at the entire Veda. They don't look at the entire Veda or the goal of the Veda. They just look at one part of the Veda. And Veda Vadarataha, they don't understand the essence of the Veda. So they take something else to be its essence. And then na anyad asti iti. They say there's nothing else. There's just dharma, artha, kama, moksha. We all know that there are 4 pursuits in life, right? Dharma is the pursuit of duty, of righteousness. Artha is the pursuit of wealth. Kama, the pursuit of pleasure, and moksha, the pursuit of liberation. But they take moksha or liberation not self-realization necessarily, but to gain heavenly worlds, to gain heavenly worlds, to go to other worlds and enjoy even more. And they say there's nothing else in life. It's just this. It's just this. You know, you do whatever you have to do to get more pleasure, more wealth, more desire, so you can enjoy more. You can enjoy heavenly worlds. For us, we might not think of heavenly worlds like Swarga or something, but enjoy a vacation. There you go. Enjoy a vacation for some point in time. After your punya is over, then you come back. And this is what we, or how we live life. We pursue all of the things in the world, save up so that we can enjoy. And then again, pursue, save up, so again we can enjoy. Because they believe there's nothing else. And they are, in 43, we will see, they're kamat manaha, means they're full of endless desires. What is desire really? When we talk about desire, it's really interesting because number one, desire is just a thought. Desire is a thought. And sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we hold it so close and hold it so dear to us, but desire is actually just a thought. It's a passing thought. And why does desire comes? It comes because of discontent. It comes because we're not content with something. Therefore, we desire. I'm not fully feeling full. I'm not feeling whole. And therefore, I want something. So desire stems from ignorance. And what happens is, as long as we are ignorant of who we are, we will have desires. We will have desires, but we will try to fulfill those desires in many, many ways. We will try to get a family. We will try to build our social life. We will try to get more money. We will try to travel more. We will try to gain more fame. We will try to do so many, many things. But by fulfilling a desire, we never end a desire. It's like what it says in Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Desire is like a fire. And the more you fulfill it, it's like just adding ghee to it. It will just go and crop up. And so this is what they are, like endless desires. It's not going to end. It's not going to end until and unless we turn it into a selfless direction. So kamat manaha means that desire, that list is endless. It just keeps going and going and going. If a desire could really fulfill us, we would have been fulfilled. We would have been fulfilled. But the fact is we're not. We still have atripti. We're still discontent. We're still discontent, but we're still thinking that a certain desire will fulfill us. And eventually these desires also enslave us. It's said very beautifully in Bhartrahari's Vairagya Shatkam. He says that it's not that we're enjoying the world is enjoying us. The world is enjoying us because nothing's happening to the world, but we're getting tired, we're getting drained, we're getting exhausted. So the world is enjoying us. We're not really enjoying the world. So kamat mana and swarga para. So as I said, their highest goal is just these heavenly realms. And they want to just do everything for power. So they're speaking these words. We say pushpitam vacham. Now I'm describing the speech. So you will see, for those of you who speak Sanskrit or learning Sanskrit, in 42 and 43, the words which are in first case, those describe the kinds of people who we're talking about. And everything on second case is really describing the speech. So now we're going back to describe the speech. It says pushpitam vacham. It's flowery speech. Means it's not fruitful. It's not fruitful. It's all flowery. It's all talk. Like, this is so wonderful. This is so great. It's the kind of thing that, you know, when you ask someone, hey, how are you? And they're like, yeah, everything's good. Everything's wonderful. But if you talk to them for 10 minutes, it's not so wonderful, right? So this is pushpitam vacham. On the surface, it's like, yeah, everything's wonderful, everything's good. But if you dig deeper, there's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. And so these words are just Kriya Vishesha Bahula, very elaborate, describing specific actions. Let's do this, specifically in the Vedas. Let's do this ritual so we can get Swarga. Let's do this ritual so we can get more wealth. And all of it is just to gain more wealth, more power. All of it is to do that. And at the end of the day, all of it is to get a new birth. Because we forget that every desire is a new birth. Do you know, every time you and I desire something, we will have to go through it. We will have to go through it. And it's very difficult because sometimes you don't desire it anymore, but then you desired it at some point in time. So you have to go through it. So if you're ever asking yourself, why am I in this family, in this place, in this profession? Some point in time, we had that desire. And because of that desire, this is where we're driven. So every single desire is a new birth. It's a new thing we have to go through. Dhruva desired, to be up in the heavenly. He wanted a really, really high exalted position in the sky. But after some time of doing tapasya, he says, I don't want that anymore. But when Bhagavan appeared to him, Bhagavan said, well, you desired it at some point in time, so now you have to go through it. So this is what we forget, that every single desire is a new birth. And so this is the mindset of desire-prompted action. So now we'll read verse number 44. Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam
Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam
Taya pahrita chetasam
Taya pahrita chetasam
Vyavasayatmika buddhihi
Vyavasayatmika buddhihi
Samadhau na vidhiyate
Samadhau na vidhiyate
Bhogaishwarya prasaktanam Taya pahrita chetasam Vyavasayatmika buddhihi Samadhau na vidhiyate. So what he says here is Bhogaishwarya prasaktana. So of those people who are attached, prasakta, to bhoga, to pleasure and aishwarya and lordship, and taya, by those words, by that words in the karma kanda, apahrita chetasam, it's like their mind has been kidnapped. Vyavasayatmika buddhihi, that single-pointed, resolute intellect or determination, samadha, in their minds, navidiyate, it's not known in their minds. Means they cannot achieve it. So the people or that mindset who's just in the world for just innumerable pleasures, innumerable desires, and just wanting to go ahead and enjoy, and their mind has been kidnapped by that pleasure, they're not able to focus on that infinite truth. They're not able to focus on the goal. They cannot have that single-pointed determination. And so you and I will find that that mindset will be all over the place, all over the place. And every couple of months changing this desire, changing the means, changing the desire, changing the means, going from here to there. That mind cannot find peace. It will not find peace. And so the trick for that mind, how Lord Krishna is so beautiful and so sympathetic to us, because many of us may have those minds. He tames those minds with karma yoga so that they slowly become focused, and then he immerses those minds in jnana yoga. That's the whole science of Vedanta, really. It's just taming that mind to slowly go beyond that mind. So now that Arjuna understands what is the difference between karma yoga and karma. So what have we seen so far? Okay, so with karma yoga, there is a dedication towards a higher ideal. There's something higher than us. So it's centered on dharma, centered on dharmic principles. With regular action, it's centered on pleasure. That's what it's centered on. In karma yoga, there is a process to go to moksha. That's what one eventually wants to do. But in regular action, all one wants is more pleasure and more power. In karma yoga, we're trying to break the cycle of birth and death. We're trying to break that. In karma, we're going through birth and birth and birth again in higher and lower realms. In karma yoga, we find that we're able to sustain that single-pointed determination, and we're able to keep going. And there's also a pleasure in it, a very deep, peaceful pleasure. We find it peaceful. But in karma, we find that we're so branched out in our thoughts, and they keep changing. In karma yoga, there's a process of purification happening. But in regular karma, there's just this process of totally revolving again and again and again. So we find that there are two different things. And Lord Krishna is making this very clear to Arjuna so that he slowly can get to karma yoga. Remember, the whole premises of the Bhagavad Gita is how it starts in the beginning is Arjuna breaks down. He feels like he can't fight. So Lord Krishna is trying to tell him, do your duty in the spirit of karma yoga. And so now in this next verse, he's going to give Arjuna sort of a hint as to how to develop this attitude of being a karma yogi. So this is a very, very beautiful verse, and we'll see it in verse 45. Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha
Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha
Nistraigurnyo Bhavarjuna
Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna
Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvastaha
Nirdvando Nitya Sattvastho
Niryogakshema Atmavan
Niryogakshema Atmavan
Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha Nistraigurnyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvastaha Niryogakshema Atmavan. So it's very beautiful verse. Lord Krishna says, Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha. The Vedas, Vishaya. Vishaya means their subject matter is Traigunya, is the three gunas. But you, Arjuna, Nistraigurnyo Bhava, you be beyond the three gunas. And he says, how do you do this? First, you become Atmavan. You become Atmavan means self-controlled. Niryogakshema means free from all of these worries of acquiring and securing. Nitya Sattvastaha, be sattvic. And finally, he says, Nirdvandvaha, and go beyond these pairs of opposites. So the translation reads like this. The Vedas deal with three attributes. Be you above these three attributes or gunas. O Arjuna, free yourself from the pairs of opposites and ever remain in Satva, freed from all thoughts of acquisition and preservation, and be established in the self. So here, when we say Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha, What that means is, so here, when we're talking about the Vedas, in this particular context, in 45, we're talking about the Karma Kanda. We're talking about the Karma Kanda. In the Karma Kanda itself, there's 3 gunas. What do you mean there's 3 gunas? There's 3 kinds of results that you can get in the Karma Kanda. When you do certain actions, you can go to a very high, what we call heavenly realm, right? Heavenly realm, which we call Maha, Janaha, Tapaha, Satyam, these high heavenly realms. Or you can do certain actions and get these Rajasic realms, which are like Bhuhu, Bhuva, Swaha, which are like earth, right? When you do a mixture of Punya and Papa, when you have a mixture of merit and demerit, you end up in this earth, right? So we all have this mixture. When one does prohibited actions, or what we call Nishiddha karma, then they end up in this lower realms. So in that way, so that's the tamasic realms. So the higher realms are the sattvic realms, then the earthly realms, like where we are now, are the rajasic realms, and then the lower worlds are the tamasic realms. So he says this Karma Kanda has these 3 realms, and those who engage in this Karma Kanda are trying to either get to a better place. Hopefully, most of them are trying to get to a better place. But what I want you to do, Arjuna, is Nistraigunya. You go beyond these 3 gunas. I want you to go to the realm of moksha. I don't want you to go or stick into the realm of just karma. I want you to be led to moksha. And moksha is beyond the 3 gunas. Because the mind itself is 3 gunas. The mind itself is 3 gunas. Moksha is what we call Atma, realizing our true nature, Atma, and that is beyond the mind. So I want you to go beyond that. And how do you do that? So Nirdvandvaha. So maybe we'll take this up first. Nirdvandvaha means go beyond these pairs of dualities. So remember, we saw this verse very beautifully in Bhagavad Gita. We just saw it, verse number 38, where he says that you make everything equal. It's in verse 2.38. Sukha dukhe same kritva labha labho jaya jayo tato yuddhaya yujjasta neva papam avapsisi. So he says, make everything equanimous. How can we be equanimous in action? When it's dedicated to something higher, when it's something other than ourselves and not just about ourselves, then we can be equanimous. We're able to receive joy and sorrow the same. We're able to receive gain and loss the same, victory and defeat the same, when our goal is something bigger. When it's just about us, surely, if we don't get what we want, we're going to be bummed out. We're going to feel dejected. We're going to feel so sad when it's just about us. So when it's just about us, we cannot be equanimous. So he tells Arjuna, be equanimous in every situation. Another way to look at this equanimity is oftentimes when we look at situations, we'll see them as either joy or sorrow. Like this happened and this is joy. This is a good result, or this is a bad result, or this is a negative result, or this is a positive result. And so our minds tend to classify this result versus that result, this result versus that result. Instead of classifying everything into 2, just see it as growth. It's not good or bad, but it's just growth. Whatever result we get is what we're meant to get. And that's what's going to help us grow. So another way to be equanimous is just see it as this is something that I received. This is prasad from Bhagavan, and this is going to help me grow. So he says, be beyond this. Then he says, Nitya Sattvastaha. Before we can even go beyond the 3 gunas or attempt to realize the self, what has to happen is our mind slowly has to develop into a predominantly sattvic mind. when we study 14th chapter, 17th chapter, even 16th chapter, we'll see there's a lot of Satva, Rajas, Tamas, and even 18th chapter. And so these chapters deal, this whole Nitya Sattvastaha is dealt with in detail in those chapters specifically. So how does one become more sattvic? This is a question that all of us must ask ourselves, because the goal of all spiritual sadhana is to be more sattvic. If we were to put everything, all the sadhanas that we do into one word, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get into a place of sattva. Sometimes we call that sattva as chitta shuddhi, purity of mind, and chitta ekagrata. Sattva starts for a seeker with their vyavahara, or daily actions. This is how sattva starts. If we can't even maintain sattva in our daily actions, it's very difficult to maintain sattva otherwise. So first, seeker must see their daily routine, their daily habits. Is there are we getting, it's from the basics, I'm just speaking from the basics. Are we getting up at a sattvic hour? Are we performing our sadhana? Are we eating sattvic food? Are we sleeping at a sattvic time? From our just daily vyavahara, first we have to just look at that. How can we bring in more sattva into our daily lives? And this is something that we all have to think about. I'm going to actually ask you at the end of the class to think about. The second is, how can I bring more sattva into my relationships? So are there places, are there times when I'm interacting where it's not sattvic? Are there avenues that are not so sattvic? How can I bring in more of that? Obviously, places that we go to, jobs that we have, situations that we're in won't always be 100% sattvic. But when it's in my control, or when it's in my choice, am I choosing sattva? Am I choosing sattva in my relationships? Next, the seeker also has to look at, how are they spending their free time? Can my free activity, or, people want to go out, people want to enjoy, people want to do all of these things, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But can I put a little bit of sattva there? For example, if one wants to watch a movie, can we watch a sattvic movie? If one wants to travel somewhere, can we stop by a temple, right? If someone wants to go and eat in a restaurant, fine. Can we have a sattvic conversation, right? So am I able to put an element of sattva in these things, well, in my free time, in things that I spend my free time on? And am I able to do that? When we start as seekers looking at our daily vyavahara, our daily lives, and then slowly we look at our relationships, and then we look at how we're spending our free time. When we slowly try to bring in sattva in those aspects, then the mind will become sattvic. It will align with that. But if we can't even bring in sattva in our daily habits, it's going to be very hard to cultivate that sattvic mind. So first we have to start from that, from back to the basics. Okay? Niryogakshema and Atmavan. Now these two words are very beautiful. So I will explain these two words in our next class, because Niryoga, as I told you, Nitya Sattvastaha, that is chapter 14, chapter 16, 17, 18, that word is explained. Atmavan. That word is explained in chapter 6. So it's really beautiful because in this particular verse, Lord Krishna is hinting at all of the chapters that that's yet to come for Arjuna. So I'll explain Niryoga-kshema and Atmavan in detail in the next session. For now, I'll just summarize what we've done so that it's clear. Today, we really started from elaborating on verse 41, and we really saw how someone who is on the spiritual path is very conscientious and very clear about the goal. There's no doubt, there's no gray area. There's absolute clarity that my life is about evolution. My life is about growth. It's about realization. And that's where I'm headed. And as long as one becomes very clear on their goal, everything is easy. It's easier to make decisions. It's more time saved, more energy saved, because everything is just going towards this. That's what you call vyavasayatmika buddhi. This kind of person who is so clear will be highly efficient. That's why you see our saints and sages. Sometimes you wonder, like someone like Adi Shankaracharya ji, for 32 years, how is he able to do so much? Is this vyavasayatmika buddhi? There's no doubt about it. But when we are not clear about our goal in life, and we have many goals, and we still have many wants and many desires, we will find we're stressed, we're tensed, we are just wanting to get energy. We just have so many different directions that we're looking at, and we waste a lot of time. We waste a lot of time. So here, Lord Krishna really brings out karma yoga versus karma. Then we also saw in verses 42 to 44 how people who are just centered on the karma kanda of the Vedas think that that's all, that there's nothing more than that. And liberation for them is going to higher worlds, or in our cases, experiencing more pleasure, experiencing higher realms of pleasure. And this is all that their mind is concerned in doing, just acquiring more name, fame, wealth, and pleasure. And they go on, desiring. And their desires are absolutely endless. So Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you gotta come out of this mentality. And the way to do it is understand that the Vedas in verse 45, the Karma Kanda deals with the three gunas, going to different realms or experiencing different pleasures. But I want you to experience something that's beyond that, which is Nistraya Guna, which is moksha. And the way you do that is nirdvandva, be equanimous, as what I've told you in verse 38, and start cultivating sattva in your life. In these simple ways that I've told you. And niryoga-kshema means, if you really think about yoga-kshema, niryoga-kshema means being free from worry, and atmavan, being established in the self. Okay? So before I say the closing prayer, what I want you to do is think about 5 things that you can do to make your life more sattvic. Okay? So for next week, and I'll ask you to share after next week, after we do class, when we do our Q&As, I want you to think of 5 ways, and I'll also think of 5 ways that we can make our lives more sattvic. And it can be from the very basic to the time we wake up, to what we eat, to who we interact with. But let's really think, because this is not just a class of discourse and discussion, but it's also a class of evolution. Okay, so we'll say the closing prayer, and then those who want to ask questions or want to share thoughts, please stay back. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.